The auctioneer's voice rang through the parlor like a death knell. Sold to the gentleman in the gray coat. Evelyn Mercer stood frozen as strangers carried her mother's piano past her, bumping it carelessly against the doorframe. Everything was going, the paintings, the silverware, even the curtains her grandmother had sewn 40 years ago. Her father had drowned himself in debt and whiskey, and now Boston society watched his only daughter pay the price. Winter was coming. The creditors wanted her out by week's end, and Evelyn had exactly one option left: a marriage proposal from a Montana rancher she'd never met, never seen, never heard speak her name. If you want to see how a fallen society girl survives the brutal frontier and finds something stronger than she ever imagined, stay with me until the end. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. The house smelled like other people now. Evelyn stood in the corner of what used to be the drawing room, watching a woman in a feathered hat run her gloved fingers across the mantelpiece. The woman wrinkled her nose, said something to her husband about dust, and moved on. They were shopping. That's what this was. Her entire life laid out like goods in a store window. Lot 47, the auctioneer called. Mahogany writing desk, circa 1821. Do I hear $10? That was her father's desk, the one where he used to sit her on his knee and let her play with his fountain pen while he wrote letters. Before the drinking got bad. Before the gambling debts piled up like snow against a door you couldn't open anymore. A man in the back raised his hand. 10. 12, someone else said. Evelyn turned away. She couldn't watch this part. Her father had been dead 3 weeks. They'd found him in his study with an empty laudanum bottle and a half-finished letter of apology that explained nothing. The funeral had been small. Most of his friends had quietly disappeared once the creditors started circling. The few who came stood in the back of the church, faces carefully blank, like they were afraid poverty might be contagious. The estate lawyer had been blunt. There's nothing left, Miss Mercer, less than nothing. Your father owed money to half of Boston, the house, the furnishings, even your mother's jewelry. It all has to be sold. You'll be lucky if there's enough to cover the debts. And me? Evelyn had asked. He'd looked uncomfortable. You have family, I assume? She didn't. Her mother's people had disowned her when she married a man they considered beneath her station. Her father's brother had died in the war. There were distant cousins somewhere in Philadelphia, but they'd made it clear years ago they wanted nothing to do with her father's mess. I see, the lawyer had said. Well, you're of age. You'll have to make your own arrangements. Make your own arrangements. As if it were that simple. As if a woman alone with no money and no family could just walk out into the world and make a life. She'd spent the first week after the funeral in a kind of fog, sorting through her father's papers, trying to understand how bad things really were. The answer was worse than she'd imagined. He'd mortgaged the house twice, borrowed against his investments, made promises he couldn't keep to men who didn't forgive. The second week, she'd started looking for work, but her education had been designed to make her an ornament, not a wage earner. She could play piano, speak French, embroider pillowcases. She could discuss literature and pour tea and manage a household staff she no longer had. None of that translated into employment. The few positions she found, governess, lady's companion, paid barely enough to cover room and board, and all of them required references she couldn't provide. By the third week, she was desperate enough to consider things she'd never imagined. There was a boarding house near the docks that might take her on as a maid. A factory that made shirtwaists was hiring, though the conditions were grim and the pay worse. A woman at church had mentioned quietly that there were other options for girls in her position. She hadn't elaborated. She hadn't needed to. And then she'd found the advertisement. It had been tucked into the back pages of the newspaper, between notices for patent medicines and farm equipment. Wanted, respectable woman for marriage, must be of good character and willing to relocate to Montana territory. Widower with ranch seeks practical partner. No romance, no illusions. Reply to Lucas Hale, Stillwater, Montana. She'd read it 3 times, certain she was misunderstanding something. But no, it was exactly what it appeared to be. A man advertising for a wife the way someone might advertise for a cook or a farmhand. Her first instinct had been to throw the paper away. It was absurd, desperate, the kind of thing women did in novels when they'd run out of options. Except she had run out of options. She'd written to him that same night. The letter had been stilted, formal, deeply awkward. She'd tried to present herself honestly, gently bred but penniless, educated but inexperienced, willing to work but uncertain what that meant on a Montana ranch. She told him about her father's death and the debts because it seemed important to be truthful. She hadn't mentioned how scared she was. That felt like something a practical partner wouldn't need to hear. His reply had come faster than she'd expected. The handwriting was plain, the sentences short. He was 34 years old. His first wife had died in childbirth 6 years ago, along with their son. He ran a cattle ranch in the mountains west of Stillwater. The work was hard. The winters were brutal. He needed someone who could pull her weight, not a decoration. If she was serious, he'd send money for the train. If she wasn't, he appreciated her honesty and wished her well. There was no poetry in it, no attempt to charm or persuade, just a straightforward offer from a man who seemed to expect disappointment. She'd written back the same day. Yes, she was serious. The money had arrived a week later, enough for a train ticket and a little extra, and a note. Bring warm clothes and sturdy boots. Leave everything else. Now here she was, watching strangers pick through the bones of her old life, with a single trunk packed and a train ticket in her pocket. Tomorrow morning, she'd board the westbound express. In 10 days, if the schedule held, she'd step off in Montana and meet the man she'd agreed to marry. She had no idea what he looked like. No idea if he was kind or cruel, patient or demanding. No idea if she'd survive a single month in a place she'd only read about in books. But she knew she couldn't stay here. Miss Mercer? She turned. The lawyer was picking his way through the crowd, looking vaguely apologetic. I'm afraid we need you to sign some final documents, the deed transfer, the debt settlement. Just a formality, but it needs to be done before you leave. She followed him into what used to be her father's study. The room was almost empty now. They'd taken his desk, his chair, the bookshelf, even the rug. Just bare walls and dusty floorboards and the ghost of what used to be. The lawyer spread the papers across an old crate someone had left behind. Sign here, and here, and initial here. She signed without reading. It didn't matter anymore. None of it was hers. You have a place to go? The lawyer asked, not quite meeting her eyes. I only ask because, well, it's none of my business, of course, but I'm getting married, Evelyn said. The words felt strange in her mouth. Unreal. He looked surprised. Oh, well, congratulations then. Thank you. He hesitated. Forgive me, but I don't recall hearing about an engagement. It's recent, she said. He lives out west, Montana. The lawyer's eyebrows went up. Montana? That's quite a distance. Yes. And you've known this gentleman long? Long enough, Evelyn said, which was true in its way. She'd known him long enough to understand what he was offering. A trade, her labor and companionship in exchange for survival. It was more honest than most marriages in her social circle had ever been. The lawyer didn't look convinced, but he was too polite to push. Well, I hope you'll be very happy. Thank you, Evelyn said again, though happiness seemed beside the point. She'd settle for safe, for fed, for a roof that didn't belong to creditors. She left him there and made her way upstairs, stepping carefully around clusters of people examining the bedroom furniture. Her old room was already bare. They'd taken everything yesterday, the bed, the wardrobe, the vanity where she used to sit and brush her hair. She stood in the doorway for a moment, trying to feel something. Sadness, anger, nostalgia. But all she felt was tired. She'd said her goodbyes to this place weeks ago, sitting beside her father's grave, while rain soaked through her black dress. Everything after that had just been procedure. She turned and walked back downstairs, out the front door, past the people still browsing through her family's remnants. The air outside was cold and sharp, smelling like fallen leaves and chimney smoke. October in Boston. She'd always loved this time of year. She wondered what October looked like in Montana. The boarding house where she'd been staying was 6 blocks away. She walked quickly, head down, avoiding eye contact with people she used to know. She'd gotten good at that in the past few weeks. The invisibility of ruin. Mrs. Graham, the landlady, was in the kitchen when Evelyn let herself in. She was a squat, practical woman who asked few questions and expected rent on time. When Evelyn had explained she'd be leaving in the morning, Mrs. Graham had simply nodded and said she'd need the room cleared by 8. Train leaves at 9, Evelyn said now, climbing the narrow stairs to her room. Don't miss it, Mrs. Graham called after her. Her trunk was already packed. One change of clothes, a nightgown, her mother's hairbrush, a few books. She'd sold everything else, jewelry, dresses, anything that might bring a few dollars. The sturdy boots Lucas Hale had recommended were wrapped in newspaper at the bottom of the trunk. She'd never owned boots before, never needed them. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed and pulled out the last letter he'd sent. She'd read it so many times the creases were starting to tear. Miss Mercer, your train should arrive in Stillwater on the 19th, assuming no delays. I'll meet you at the station. The minister has agreed to marry us that same day. I know that's fast, but there's no point drawing it out. If you're coming all this way, we might as well get it done. I want to be clear about what you're walking into. The ranch is 20 miles outside town. We're alone out here, except for 2 hired hands who live in the bunkhouse. The main house is small, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a front room. It's clean but plain, no luxuries. Winter starts early in the mountains. By November, we'll be snowed in. You won't see town again until spring thaw, which is usually late April. That means 6 months of isolation. No neighbors, no society, just work and weather. If that sounds unbearable, don't come. I won't think less of you, but if you're coming, come ready to work. I can't afford passengers. Lucas Hale. She'd almost written back to tell him, never mind. 6 months of isolation. No neighbors, no society. It sounded like prison. But then she'd looked around her rented room, 4 walls, a sagging bed, a wash basin, and realized this was prison. At least in Montana, she'd have space to breathe. She folded the letter and tucked it back into her pocket. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow, everything changes. She didn't sleep much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face, heard the auctioneer's voice, felt the weight of strangers' eyes. When the sky finally started to lighten, she gave up and got dressed. The clothes she'd chosen for travel were practical. A simple brown wool dress, a heavy cloak, the boots. She pinned her hair back severely, the way she imagined a ranch wife might wear it. When she caught sight of herself in the small mirror above the wash basin, she barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked older, harder. Good, she thought. Maybe that would help. Mrs. Graham was already up when Evelyn came downstairs, trunk in hand. The landlady looked her over and nodded approvingly. Sensible, she said. You'll do all right. Thank you, Evelyn said. For everything? Nothing to thank me for. You paid your rent. Mrs. Graham hesitated, then added, But for what it's worth, I think you're braver than most. Going out there alone, starting over. Evelyn wasn't sure brave was the right word. Desperate seemed more accurate. But she appreciated the sentiment. The train station was crowded and loud and overwhelming. Evelyn checked her trunk, clutched her ticket, and found a seat in the second-class car. The other passengers were mostly men, farmers, laborers, a few salesmen. They glanced at her curiously but didn't speak. A woman traveling alone was unusual enough to be noteworthy but not scandalous. Not anymore. The train lurched forward with a screech of metal and steam. Evelyn watched through the window as Boston slid past. Familiar streets, familiar buildings, everything she'd ever known. And then the city gave way to countryside, and the countryside gave way to land she'd never seen before. The first day on the train was tolerable. The second was uncomfortable. By the third, Evelyn felt like she'd been traveling forever. The scenery outside changed from forests to farmland to endless prairie. The air grew drier. The towns they passed through grew smaller and farther apart. She read her books until she'd memorized whole passages. She tried to sleep, but the seats were hard and the train rattled constantly. She ate stale sandwiches from the dining car and drank weak coffee and tried not to think about what waited at the end of this journey. On the 5th day, they crossed into the territories. The land outside was vast and empty in a way that made her chest feel tight. She'd thought she understood space, coming from Boston. But this was different. This was a kind of emptiness that swallowed sound and distance and seemed to go on forever. A woman across the aisle noticed her staring. First time out west? Evelyn nodded. You'll get used to it, the woman said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. Or you won't, and you'll go home. Most people do one or the other pretty quick. I don't have a home to go back to, Evelyn said before she could stop herself. The woman gave her a long, measuring look. Then I guess you'll get used to it. On the 8th day, the train stopped in a town called Billings. Half the passengers got off. Evelyn stayed in her seat, watching the platform through the window. A woman was saying goodbye to her family, children clinging to her skirts, a husband carrying her trunk. They all looked sunburned and tired and happy. Evelyn turned away. The last 2 days blurred together. She was too exhausted to read, too restless to sleep. She just sat and watched the mountains grow closer, their peaks white with snow that never melted. On the afternoon of the 10th day, the conductor walked through the car calling, "Stillwater, next stop! Stillwater!" Evelyn's stomach dropped. She gathered her things with shaking hands, smoothed her dress, checked her hair in the window's reflection. She looked pale and rumpled and scared. Well, that was honest, at least. The train slowed. The platform came into view, weathered wood, a small station house, a handful of people waiting. Evelyn searched their faces, trying to guess which one might be Lucas Hale. There, a man standing apart from the others, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a battered hat pulled low. He wasn't looking at the train. He was staring at the mountains, hands in his pockets, like he was bracing himself for something unpleasant. The train stopped. Evelyn stood on legs that felt uncertain. She stepped down onto the platform, gripping her small bag, and the man turned. For a moment, they just looked at each other. He was older than she'd expected. Not old exactly, but weathered. His face was tanned and lined, his jaw shadowed with stubble. There was a scar running along his left cheekbone, pale against the darker skin. His eyes were gray and guarded and deeply, deeply tired. He took off his hat. "Miss Mercer?" His voice was quiet, rough, like he didn't use it much. "Yes," Evelyn managed. "Mr. Hale?" He nodded. "Your trunk on the train?" "Yes, they said it would be unloaded." "I'll get it." He replaced his hat and walked past her toward the baggage car, moving with a kind of deliberate economy that made her think of a man who didn't waste motion. Evelyn stood on the platform, suddenly very aware that she'd just traveled 2,000 miles to marry a complete stranger, a stranger who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He came back carrying her trunk like it weighed nothing, which it didn't, but still. He set it down and looked at her again, his expression unreadable. "We should get this done," he said. "The wedding," Evelyn said. "You mentioned a minister. He's waiting at the church. It's not far." Lucas hesitated. "Unless you need time, to rest, eat something." She was starving, actually, and exhausted, but she shook her head. "No, you're right. We should get it done." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite relief, but close. He picked up her trunk again and gestured toward a wagon parked near the station. "This way." The wagon was old but sturdy, pulled by 2 horses that looked better cared for than most of the people she'd seen in town. Lucas loaded her trunk in the back and helped her up onto the seat. His hands were calloused and careful. He didn't meet her eyes. They rode through Stillwater in silence. The town was small, a main street with a general store, a saloon, a bank, a few other buildings she didn't have time to identify. People on the sidewalks turned to stare. A woman traveling with Lucas Hale was apparently noteworthy. The church was at the far end of town, white-clapboard with a small cross above the door. Lucas tied up the horses and came around to help Evelyn down. She took his hand, climbed down, and stood there feeling like she might be sick. "You all right?" Lucas asked. "Yes," she lied. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Let's go." The minister was waiting inside, a thin man with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He looked between them and smiled. "You must be Miss Mercer. Welcome to Stillwater." "Thank you," Evelyn said. "Shall we begin?" It was the shortest wedding ceremony Evelyn had ever witnessed. No music, no flowers, no guests. Just the 3 of them standing in front of a plain wooden altar while the minister read from his prayer book. The words washed over her: love, honor, cherish, and she repeated them when prompted, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas's voice was steady. He didn't stumble over the vows. When the minister said, "You may kiss your bride," Lucas leaned in and pressed a brief, awkward kiss to her cheek. "Congratulations," the minister said warmly. "May you find happiness together." Lucas thanked him, shook his hand, and guided Evelyn back outside. She was married now, Mrs. Lucas Hale. It didn't feel real. They climbed back into the wagon. Lucas picked up the reins, then paused. We need to stop at the store, get you some supplies before we head out to the ranch. All right, Evelyn said. The general store was crowded and chaotic. Lucas moved through it with purpose, selecting items with quick efficiency: flour, sugar, coffee, salt, matches, fabric, thread. The clerk packed everything into crates while Lucas paid. Evelyn stood to the side, feeling useless. Anything you need? Lucas asked without looking at her. I don't know what I need, Evelyn admitted. He finally met her eyes. For the first time, something almost like sympathy crossed his face. Right, you wouldn't. He turned back to the clerk. Add another wool blanket and gloves. Heavy ones. When they were done, Lucas loaded the crates into the wagon and they left town. The road, if you could call it that, wound west into the mountains. The land around them grew wilder with every mile. Grass and sagebrush gave way to pine forests. The air turned colder. Evelyn pulled her cloak tighter and tried not to think about how far they were from anything resembling civilization. It's about 3 hours to the ranch, Lucas said. We'll be there before dark. 3 hours? Evelyn repeated. 20 miles. Road's not good. That was an understatement. The wagon jolted over ruts and rocks. Evelyn clung to the seat, her teeth rattling. Lucas handled the horses with calm competence, navigating obstacles like he'd done this 1,000 times before, which he probably had. They didn't talk. Evelyn didn't know what to say, and Lucas didn't seem inclined to fill the silence. She studied him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. His hands on the reins, scarred and capable. The set of his shoulders, tense but not hostile. The way his eyes constantly scanned the landscape, like he was watching for something. What are you looking for? She finally asked. He glanced at her, surprised. Nothing specific, just habit. Cattle get loose sometimes, predators, weather. Oh. More silence. You can ask questions, Lucas said eventually, if you have them. Evelyn had about 1,000 questions. She picked one. What happened to your wife? His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Childbirth, he said finally. The baby too. Son. He lived about an hour. I'm sorry, Evelyn said quietly. Lucas didn't respond, but his hands flexed on the reins just once, and she understood. That was all he could manage. She didn't ask anything else. The sun was sinking behind the mountains when they finally turned off the main road onto a narrower track. Evelyn saw cattle grazing in the distance, dark shapes against the golden grass. And then, around a bend, a house came into view. It was small, smaller than she'd expected, though she wasn't sure what she'd expected. A simple log structure with a porch and a stone chimney. There was a barn nearby, and another smaller building that must be the bunkhouse Lucas had mentioned. 2 men were working near the barn. They looked up as the wagon approached, then went back to their task. Not unfriendly, just indifferent. Lucas pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. He climbed down, then came around to help Evelyn. She stepped down carefully, her legs shaky from the long ride. Welcome home, Lucas said. It didn't sound celebratory, just factual. Evelyn looked at the house, the mountains beyond, the endless sky turning purple with dusk. This was it. This was her life now. Lucas carried her trunk inside. The interior was as plain as he'd promised. Wooden floors, simple furniture, a stone fireplace. Clean, but stark. No curtains, no decorations. Just function. Your room's there, Lucas said, nodding toward a door off the main room. I'm across the hall. Kitchen's through there. Privy's out back. Evelyn nodded numbly. Lucas set her trunk down and stood there, looking uncomfortable. I imagine you're tired. I'll let you settle in. There's bread and butter in the kitchen if you're hungry. Thank you, Evelyn said. He hesitated at the door. This isn't what you're used to. I know that, but I'll try to make it bearable. That's the best I can offer. And then he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. Evelyn stood alone in her new home and finally let herself cry. She woke to the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. For a confused moment, Evelyn didn't know where she was. The bed was too hard. The air smelled wrong. Everything felt unfamiliar. Then memory crashed back. Montana, the ranch, Lucas, her husband. She sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in her back. The room was freezing. Pale gray light seeped through the single window, but the sun wasn't up yet. She could see her breath in the air. The crying had exhausted her last night. She'd unpacked a few things, changed into her nightgown, and collapsed into bed without even looking around properly. Now, in the pre-dawn dimness, she took stock of her new room: bare wooden walls, a narrow bed with a thin mattress, a dresser with 3 drawers, a hook on the back of the door for hanging clothes. That was it. She dressed quickly, fingers clumsy with cold, pulling on the warmest thing she owned. When she opened the door, heat from the main room rolled over her like a wave. Lucas had the fire going. He was standing at the stove, his back to her, doing something that involved a cast iron pan and the smell of bacon. He turned when he heard her. "Morning." "Good morning," Evelyn said. Her voice came out scratchy. "Coffee's ready. Cups are in the cabinet there." He gestured with the spatula he was holding, then went back to tending the pan. Evelyn found a chipped ceramic cup and poured herself coffee from the pot sitting on the stove. It was strong enough to strip paint. She took a sip and tried not to cough. "Too bitter?" Lucas asked without looking up. "No, it's fine." "You're a terrible liar." Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. "Maybe a little bitter. There's sugar in the tin. Milk's in the cold box outside." She added sugar until the coffee was drinkable, then stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do with herself. Lucas divided the bacon and eggs onto 2 plates, set them on the small wooden table, and sat down. He looked at her expectantly. "Oh," Evelyn said, and quickly sat across from him. They ate in silence. The food was plain but hot, and Evelyn was hungrier than she'd realized. She'd barely eaten anything yesterday. Lucas finished his plate in about 4 minutes, then stood and carried it to the basin. "I've got work to do," he said. "Stock to check, fences to mend. You can—" He paused, like he wasn't sure what she could do. "Get familiar with the house, I guess. There's food in the pantry if you get hungry. I'll be back around midday." "All right," Evelyn said. He grabbed his coat from a hook by the door and a battered hat from the table. "Tom and Ray, the hands, they'll be around if you need anything. Tom's the older one. Ray's got red hair, talks too much. They're good men." "Okay." Lucas hesitated at the door. I know this is strange. Give it time." Then he was gone. Evelyn sat alone at the table, staring at her half-finished eggs, and wondered what the hell she was supposed to do now. She washed the dishes first, because that seemed like something a ranch wife ought to do. The water in the basin was icy. There was a pump outside, Lucas had mentioned last night, but she'd have to heat water on the stove if she wanted it warm. She made a mental note and scrubbed the plates as best she could. Then she explored. The house wasn't large enough for exploring to take long. The main room held the table, 2 rough chairs, the stove, and the fireplace. There were pegs on the wall for coats and a shelf with a few books, farming manuals mostly, and a worn copy of something called The Virginian. The kitchen was barely a room, just an extension of the main space with a counter, a few cabinets, and the pantry Lucas had mentioned. She opened it and found sacks of flour and cornmeal, tins of coffee and beans, some root vegetables she didn't recognize. Lucas's room was across from hers. The door was closed. She didn't open it. Instead, she went back to her own room and unpacked properly. Her few dresses went in the dresser. Her mother's hairbrush went on top. Her books, 3 novels she'd managed to keep, she stacked beside the bed. When she was done, the room still looked empty. By mid-morning, she was restless and cold despite the fire. She put on her cloak and the new boots Lucas had insisted she buy and ventured outside. The ranch spread out before her in every direction, grass and sage and distant tree lines, all of it framed by mountains that seemed impossibly close and impossibly far at the same time. The sky was huge and pale and cloudless. The wind cut through her cloak like it wasn't there. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself and walked toward the barn. She could hear cattle lowing somewhere and the sound of hammering. When she rounded the corner of the barn, she saw 2 men working on a fence. The older one, Tom, she assumed, looked up and touched his hat. "Ma'am." "Hello," Evelyn said. The younger one, red-haired and freckled, grinned. "You must be the new Mrs. Hale. I'm Ray. This here's Tom." Tom nodded but didn't speak. "It's nice to meet you both," Evelyn said, though she wasn't sure if it was or not. "You settling in all right?" Ray asked. "Must be quite a change from back east." "It is," Evelyn admitted. Don't worry, you'll get used to it, or you'll freeze to death come winter. One or the other. Ray laughed like this was hilarious. Tom elbowed him. Don't scare her, Tom said. His voice was gravelly and slow. I'm not scared, Evelyn said, which was only partly a lie. Ray winked at her. That's the spirit. You need anything? Just holler. We're usually around somewhere. Thank you, Evelyn said, and walked back toward the house before they could see how badly her hands were shaking. Lucas came back just after noon, like he'd said. He stomped the dirt off his boots on the porch and came inside, bringing the smell of cold air and animals with him. Evelyn was sitting by the fire, trying to read, but she'd been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. Everything all right? Lucas asked, hanging up his coat. Yes. Fine. He looked at her like he knew she was lying again, but he didn't push. Instead, he went to the kitchen and started pulling things out of the pantry. You know how to cook? Evelyn stood up. Some. Simple things. Out here, everything's simple. Can you make bread? I've watched it done. That's not the same. Lucas set a sack of flour on the counter. Come here. I'll show you. She joined him in this kitchen, feeling utterly out of her depth. Lucas moved through the steps with the same quiet efficiency he applied to everything else, measuring flour, adding water and salt, kneading the dough with strong, practiced hands. Evelyn watched, trying to memorize the process. Your turn, Lucas said, stepping aside. Now? No point in watching if you don't try. Evelyn took a breath and reached for the flour. Her measurements were clumsy, her kneading uncertain. The dough stuck to her fingers and refused to cooperate. Lucas watched without comment, then finally reached over and adjusted her hand position. Like this. Push with the heel of your palm, then fold. Don't fight it. His hands were warm and rough against hers. Evelyn focused on the dough, trying to ignore the strange intimacy of the moment. After a few minutes, something clicked. The rhythm became easier. Better, Lucas said. He stepped back and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You'll get the hang of it. I hope so, Evelyn said. You will. You don't really have a choice. It should have sounded harsh, but it didn't, just factual. Evelyn shaped the dough into a rough loaf and set it in the pan Lucas provided. He showed her how to judge the oven temperature by feel, then left her to it while he went back outside. The bread turned out dense and lopsided, but edible. Lucas ate 2 slices with butter and didn't complain. Evelyn took that as a victory. The next few days followed the same pattern. Lucas left early, worked until midday, came back for a quick meal, then went out again until dusk. Evelyn tried to make herself useful. She learned to keep the fire going, to pump water without splashing it everywhere, to cook basic meals that didn't poison anyone. It was exhausting and frustrating and nothing like the life she'd imagined for herself. But it was also something else, something she didn't have a name for yet. On the 4th morning, she woke to find the world outside her window white. Snow had fallen during the night, several inches of it, turning the ranch into something out of a storybook. Evelyn stood at the window, mesmerized. She'd seen snow before, but not like this, not this clean and endless. When she came out to the main room, Lucas was pulling on heavy gloves. He glanced at her. First snow, came early this year. It's beautiful, Evelyn said. It's a pain in the ass, Lucas replied, but there was no heat in it. Cattle get confused, fences get buried. Everything takes twice as long. He grabbed his coat. Stay inside today. It's colder than it looks. But Evelyn didn't stay inside. After Lucas left, she bundled up in everything warm she owned and ventured out onto the porch. The cold hit her like a physical thing, stealing her breath. She went down the steps carefully, her new boots crunching in the snow. The world was utterly silent. No birds, no wind, just the soft hush of snow and her own breathing. Evelyn walked a little ways from the house, then stopped and looked around. Mountains in the distance, white against white. The barn dark and solid nearby, smoke rising from the bunkhouse chimney. She was standing there, taking it all in, when Ray came around the corner leading a horse. He saw her and grinned. Told you winter comes early. You did, Evelyn agreed. You ever ridden a horse, Mrs. Hale? Once or twice, in a park, with a saddle. Ray laughed. Well, out here it's every day and the saddle's optional. He patted the horse's neck. This is Stella. She's old and patient. You want to learn? Evelyn looked at the horse, then at Ray.
Now? Why not? Boss is out checking the north fence. Won't be back for hours. I can show you the basics. It was probably a terrible idea, but Evelyn found herself nodding.
Ray helped her up into the saddle, which was not, in fact, optional, and adjusted the stirrups. Then he led Stella in a slow circle around the yard, talking the whole time about balance and posture and how to hold the reins. Evelyn clung to the saddle horn and tried not to fall off. "You're doing fine," Ray said encouragingly. "Want to try on your own?" "I don't think—" "Just to the barn and back. Stella knows the way. She'll take care of you." Evelyn took the reins with shaking hands. Ray stepped back. Stella, bless her, started walking at an easy pace toward the barn. Evelyn's heart was pounding, but she stayed upright. When they reached the barn, she managed to turn the horse around, clumsily but successfully. On the way back, she even relaxed a little. Ray was applauding when she returned. "There you go, natural horsewoman." "I wouldn't say that," Evelyn said, but she was smiling.
"Give it a month. You'll be riding like you were born to it." She slid down from the saddle, legs wobbling. Ray took Stella's reins and gave Evelyn a cheerful salute. "Same time tomorrow?" "Maybe," Evelyn said. She went back inside, cheeks burning from the cold, and realized she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not quite happiness, but close, something lighter. Lucas noticed that evening. He was sitting by the fire, mending a piece of harness, and Evelyn was at the table trying to darn a sock, badly. He looked up and studied her face. "You went outside," he said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn wondered how he knew. "Just for a little while." "Ray said you rode Stella." "He told you?" "Mentioned it. Said you did well." Evelyn waited for him to say she shouldn't have, or that it was dangerous or something, but Lucas just went back to his mending. After a moment, he added, "Ray's a good teacher. If you want to keep learning, that's fine." "All right," Evelyn said. That night, after they'd eaten and cleaned up and Lucas had banked the fire, he paused at his bedroom door. "You did good today, with the writing, and the bread was better." It was the most he'd said to her in days. Evelyn felt something warm unfold in her chest. "Thank you." He nodded and disappeared into his room. Evelyn lay in bed that night, listening to the silence of the ranch, and thought maybe this could work. The next week brought more snow, then a cold snap that made the first snow seem like a joke. Evelyn learned to wrap her face against the wind, to lay her clothes until she could barely move, to break ice on the water bucket every morning. She learned to cook stew and fry salt pork and make biscuits that didn't turn out like rocks. She learned the names of the cattle Lucas pointed out, Bessie and Old Red, and the troublemaker heifer he called Houdini because she kept escaping. And she learned Lucas. The way he moved through the world with careful deliberation. The way he listened more than he spoke. The way his face closed down whenever anyone mentioned his first wife, which Ray did exactly once before Tom kicked him under the table. They settled into a routine. Lucas worked. Evelyn managed the house. They ate meals together, usually in silence, but it was a comfortable silence now, or at least less uncomfortable. 2 weeks after Evelyn arrived, a woman showed up at the door. Evelyn answered the knock to find a tall, weathered woman in her 50s standing on the porch, holding a basket covered with a cloth. "You must be Lucas's new wife," the woman said. "I'm Margaret Henderson. My ranch is about 10 miles east. Thought I'd come by and introduce myself." "Oh," Evelyn said, startled. "Please, come in." Margaret stepped inside, looked around the sparse main room, and set her basket on the table. "Brought you some preserves, apricot and strawberry. Figured you might not have much put up yet." "That's very kind," Evelyn said. Would you like coffee?" "Love some." They sat at the table while the coffee brewed. Margaret had the kind of face that looked like it had seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. She studied Evelyn with frank curiosity. "So, Boston girl," Ray said. "Yes. Long way from home." "It is," Evelyn agreed. "Lucas treating you all right?" The directness caught Evelyn off guard. "Yes, he's been fair." Margaret snorted. "Fair, that's Lucas all over. Fair and careful, and about as romantic as a fence post." She softened slightly. "But he's a good man. Lost too much is all. Makes a person guarded." "I know about his wife," Evelyn said quietly. "And his son." "Then you know why he's the way he is." Margaret accepted the coffee Evelyn poured and took a sip. "This is terrible." "I know," Evelyn said. "I'm still learning." "Well, you'll get there, or you won't, and you'll go back east." Margaret set down her cup. "I'll tell you what I tell every woman who comes out here. This life will either make you or break you. There's no in between. The ones who make it are the ones who stop trying to bring Boston with them and start living where their feet are planted." Evelyn thought about that. "I don't have Boston to bring. I left everything behind." "Then you're ahead of most." Margaret stood. "I should get going. Storm's coming in tonight, but I wanted to meet you proper, and to tell you there's a few of us women scattered around these parts. We look out for each other. You need anything, you send word." "Thank you," Evelyn said, and meant it. After Margaret left, Evelyn stood on the porch and watched her ride away. The sky to the west was turning dark and heavy. "Storm coming," Margaret had said. Evelyn wondered what that meant out here. She found out that night. The wind picked up around sunset, rattling the windows and moaning through the eaves. By the time they sat down to dinner, snow was driving sideways past the windows. Lucas kept glancing outside, his expression tense. "Going to be a bad one," he said. "How bad?" Evelyn asked. "Bad enough." He pushed his plate away, only half finished. "I need to check the stock, make sure everything's secured." "In this?" "Especially in this." Lucas was already pulling on his coat. "Stay inside, keep the fire going. If I'm not back in an hour, don't come looking." "Lucas?" But he was already gone, the door slamming shut behind him. Evelyn stood there, heart pounding, and listened to the wind scream. She tried to distract herself. She stoked the fire, washed the dishes, attempted to read. But her eyes kept going to the window, to the darkness and the snow. An hour passed, then another. Lucas didn't come back. Evelyn put on her cloak and went to the door. The wind nearly ripped it out of her hands. Snow stung her face like thrown sand. She could barely see the barn, and that was only 20 yards away. She was about to step outside when a figure emerged from the white. Lucas, bent against the wind, one arm wrapped around his middle. He stumbled up the porch steps and through the door, and Evelyn saw blood on his coat. "What happened?" she demanded. "Fence broke, cows got through." Lucas was breathing hard, his face gray. "Tried to get them back. One of the posts came down. Caught me in the ribs." He sat down heavily in one of the chairs. Evelyn knelt beside him, her hands shaking. "Let me see." "It's fine." "It's not fine. You're bleeding. Let me see." Lucas gave in, which told her how much pain he was actually in. He shrugged out of his coat and Evelyn helped him pull his shirt up. There was a long gash along his left side, not deep but ugly, already starting to bruise. "I need to clean this," Evelyn said. She didn't know much about doctoring, but she knew that much. "Do you have bandages? Medicine?" "Cabinet in my room, bottom shelf." She found the supplies, old but clean bandages, a bottle of something that smelled like it could strip rust off iron. When she came back, Lucas was still sitting there, eyes closed, breathing carefully. Evelyn heated water on the stove, tore an old cloth into strips, and set to work. She cleaned the wound as gently as she could, but Lucas still flinched. She poured the medicine over it. He hissed through his teeth and wrapped the bandages tight. "You should rest," she said when she was done. "Can't. Still got work. Tom and Ray can handle it. You need to rest." Lucas looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. "All right." She helped him to his room, which felt strange and intimate even though she was just supporting his weight. He sat on the edge of his bed and looked up at her. "Thank you," he said. "You don't need to thank me." "I do, though." His voice was quiet. "You didn't have to come out here. Marry a stranger. Put up with all this. But you did. And you're managing better than I expected." Evelyn didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and left him to rest. The storm lasted 3 days. The world outside became a howling white void. Lucas stayed inside, moving carefully, letting his ribs heal. Evelyn kept the fire going, rationed their food, and tried not to think about how isolated they were. No neighbors. No town. Just the two of them and Tom and Ray in the bunkhouse, cut off from everything. On the second day, Lucas taught her how to play cards. They sat at the table while wind battered the house, playing hand after hand of rummy. Lucas was a terrible teacher.
He kept forgetting to explain rules and getting annoyed when she made mistakes. But he tried. And Evelyn found herself laughing at his exasperation, which seemed to surprise them both. "You're enjoying this," Lucas said, almost accusingly. "Maybe a little," Evelyn admitted. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "You're strange," says the man who advertised for a wife in the newspaper. "Fair point." Lucas dealt another hand. "You ever regret it, coming out here?" Evelyn thought about it. "Ask me again in the spring." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." On the third day, the storm broke. The wind died. The sun came out, turning the snow into something that hurt to look at. Lucas went outside to assess the damage. Fences down, drifts piled against the barn, 2 cows missing. He was gone most of the day. When he came back at dusk, he looked exhausted. "Found the cows," he said. "Both alive, which is something, but we've got a lot of repairs ahead." "I can help," Evelyn offered. Lucas looked at her. "You know how to mend a fence?" "No, but I can learn." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, tomorrow. We'll see how you do." The next morning, Evelyn woke before dawn, dressed in her warmest clothes, and met Lucas outside. The air was brutally cold and perfectly still. Her breath came out in clouds. Lucas handed her a pair of work gloves, too big, but better than nothing, and led her to where the fence had come down. "Fence posts go in the ground about 2 feet, he explained. "Wire stretches between them. When a post breaks, you've got to dig it out and replace it. When wire breaks, you've got to splice it or replace the whole section." He made it sound simple. It wasn't. Evelyn spent the next 4 hours learning just how hard ranch work actually was. Digging in frozen ground, lifting posts that weighed more than she did, stretching wire that fought back. Her hands cramped inside the gloves. Her back screamed. Sweat soaked through her clothes despite the cold. Lucas worked beside her, patient but firm. He showed her how to position her body for leverage, how to use tools she'd never seen before, how to judge when something was secure enough. He didn't coddle her. When she did something wrong, he corrected her. When she did it right, he moved on. By midday, Evelyn's muscles were shaking. Lucas called a break and they sat on a fallen log eating cold biscuits and cheese. Evelyn's hands were blistered despite the gloves. She didn't complain. "You're tougher than you look," Lucas said. "I have to be," Evelyn replied. He glanced at her. "No, you don't. You could have stayed inside, done the cooking and cleaning, and called it enough. Most women would." "I'm not most women." "No," Lucas agreed quietly. "You're not." They finished the fence work by late afternoon. Evelyn was so tired she could barely stand, but she'd done it. She'd actually done it. When they walked back to the house together, Lucas said, "You did good today." It shouldn't have meant so much, but it did. That night after dinner, Lucas brought out a small leather pouch and set it on the table. "Here." Evelyn opened it. Inside were salves and ointments. "What's this?" "For your hands. They're torn up." Lucas looked almost embarrassed. "You should take care of them. Tomorrow's going to be more of the same." Evelyn rubbed the salve into her blistered palms, wincing at the sting, and felt something settle in her chest. This was real. This marriage, this life, this strange man who noticed when her hands were hurt and did something about it. December came, and with it the kind of cold Evelyn had only read about. The kind that made the house timbers crack at night. The kind that turned water to ice in minutes. Lucas moved them into a new routine, livestock fed and watered before dawn, repairs and maintenance during daylight, everything secured by dusk because working after dark in that cold was dangerous. Evelyn learned to milk cows, which was harder and more humiliating than she'd anticipated. The first cow she tried kicked over the bucket and nearly kicked her too. Ray thought it was hilarious. Tom showed her the trick: lean your forehead against the cow's flank, work in a rhythm, don't tense up. She learned to chop wood, which gave her blisters on top of blisters and made her shoulders ache for days. She learned to recognize when a cow was sick, when a horse needed new shoes, when the weather was about to turn. She learned the landscape, which paths were safe, which creek beds flooded, where the wolves denned up in winter. And she learned Lucas. He wasn't much of a talker, but he communicated in other ways. The way he made sure she had the warmest spot by the fire. The way he always served her food first, even though he was hungrier. the way he taught her things without making her feel stupid for not knowing. One evening in mid-December, they were sitting by the fire, Lucas reading, Evelyn mending, when he suddenly spoke. "I need to tell you something." Evelyn looked up. His face was serious. "All right. When I sent for you, when I wrote that advertisement, I didn't think it would work. Didn't think anyone would answer, and when you did, I figured you'd take one look at this place and leave." He set his book aside. "But you didn't. You stayed, and you've worked harder than I had any right to expect. So I wanted you to know, this arrangement, it's turned out better than I hoped. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even particularly romantic. But coming from Lucas, it meant everything." "Thank you," Evelyn said softly. "I'm not easy to live with," Lucas continued. "I know that. I'm too quiet, too set in my ways, and there's things I don't talk about, things I maybe should. But I want you to know I'm trying." "I know you are," Evelyn said. "So am I." They sat there in the firelight, not touching, barely speaking, but something between them had shifted, something that felt like the beginning of trust. Christmas came and went quietly. No tree, no presents, just a slightly better dinner and a day off from heavy work. Margaret Henderson rode over despite the cold and brought them a fruitcake that was dense enough to use as a doorstop. They ate it anyway and pretended it was good. In January, a blizzard hit that made the earlier storm look gentle. They were trapped inside for a week. Lucas paced like a caged animal, worried about the stock, unable to do anything. Evelyn read her books for the third time and tried to keep them both from going crazy. On the fourth day, cabin fever got the better of both of them. They snapped at each other over something stupid. How to bank the fire, Evelyn thought, though later she couldn't remember. Lucas stalked off to his room. Evelyn sat by the fire and fumed. An hour later, Lucas came back out. He sat down across from her and said, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. That was my fault." Evelyn blinked. "No, it was mine. I should have." "Doesn't matter whose it was." Lucas ran a hand through his hair. "Point is, we're stuck together. We might as well not make it harder than it has to be." "Agreed," Evelyn said. They looked at each other, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Lucas smiled. A real smile. Small, but genuine. Evelyn found herself smiling back. When the blizzard finally cleared, they dug their way out together. The ranch had survived. So had the cattle. So had Tom and Ray, who emerged from the bunkhouse looking half-starved and completely stir-crazy. February brought slightly warmer days and the first hints that winter might eventually end. Lucas started talking about spring, calving season, which would be brutal, and planting, which they'd need to get done early. He talked about it like she'd be there to see it, and Evelyn realized he was right. She would be. She wasn't going anywhere. One night at the end of February, Evelyn woke to strange sounds. She lay there, disoriented, trying to place them. Footsteps. Lucas's door opening, his voice low and rough, saying something she couldn't make out. She got up and opened her own door. Lucas was standing in the main room in just his trousers, staring at nothing. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "Lucas?" Evelyn said softly. He jerked like she'd struck him. "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." "Are you all right?" "Yeah, just bad dream. I'm fine." But he wasn't fine. Evelyn could see that. She crossed the room slowly, like approaching a spooked horse. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No." "All right." She went to the stove, added wood to the banked coals, and started heating water for tea. Lucas watched her, still shaking. When the tea was ready, she poured 2 cups and handed him one. They sat at the table in silence. After a long time, Lucas spoke. "I dream about them sometimes. Mary and the baby, the way they—" He stopped, swallowed. "The way they looked afterward." Evelyn's chest tightened. "I'm sorry. It was 6 years ago. I should be past it." "I don't think grief works that way," Evelyn said quietly. Lucas looked at her. His eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. "You ever lose someone?" "My mother, when I was 12, cholera." "That why you understood about my father? The debts and all of it?" "Maybe." Evelyn wrapped her hands around her cup. "He fell apart after she died. Never really came back together." They sat there drinking bad tea in the middle of the night, sharing the kind of truths people usually kept locked away. And when Lucas finally went back to bed, Evelyn lay awake thinking that maybe, just maybe, they were becoming something more than strangers who shared a house.
March arrived with mud and wind and the slow, grudging retreat of winter. The snow started melting. The cattle grew restless. And Evelyn realized she'd made it. She'd survived her first Montana winter. More than survived. She'd learned to thrive. Her hands were calloused now, her body stronger. She could ride Stella without thinking about it, mend a fence without supervision, read the weather like a book. She'd become exactly what Lucas had advertised for, a practical partner. But something else had happened too. Something neither of them had planned for. They'd become friends. The first calf came in the middle of the night during a late March storm that felt like winter's last bitter argument with spring. Evelyn woke to Lucas shaking her shoulder, his face tense in the lamplight. "Bessie's in trouble," he said. "I need your help." She was dressed and out the door in minutes, following Lucas through driving sleet to the barn. Inside, the old cow was lying on her side in the straw, breathing hard, her eyes rolling white with pain. Tom was already there, sleeves rolled up, looking grim. "Calf's breech," Tom said. "Been trying for an hour. She's getting tired." Lucas knelt beside Bessie, running a hand along her flank. "We have to turn it. Evelyn, hold the lantern. Keep it steady." She'd never seen anything like this. Never imagined she'd be standing in a freezing barn at 2 a.m. watching two men try to save a calf that was stuck wrong. Tom's arms disappeared up to the elbows. Bessie bellowed, a sound that made Evelyn's stomach clench. Lucas kept talking to the cow, low and steady, like he could will her through this. "Got it," Tom grunted. "It's turning. Come on, girl, push." It took another 20 minutes of straining and blood, and Bessie making sounds no living thing should make. And then suddenly there was a calf, wet and steaming in the straw, and Tom was clearing its nose and mouth while Bessie lifted her head to look. "She all right?" Lucas asked. "Think so. Calf's breathing. That's something." Evelyn set down the lantern with shaking hands. Her dress was splattered with blood and worse. She didn't care. The calf was trying to stand, all knobby legs and determination, and Bessie was licking it clean with her rough tongue. Lucas looked at Evelyn. "You did good. Didn't faint or anything." "I thought about it," Evelyn admitted. He almost smiled. "But you didn't. That's what matters." They left Tom to watch over Bessie and walked back to the house through the sleet. Evelyn was shivering, exhausted, and somehow exhilarated. Lucas built up the fire while she changed into dry clothes, and when she came back out, he'd made coffee. "Calving season's going to be like this for the next month," he said. "Maybe longer. Some nights we won't sleep. Some will lose calves no matter what we do. It's hard." "I know," Evelyn said. "But you're still here." She looked at him across the table, this quiet man who'd given her a life she never expected. "Where else would I be?" Something shifted in Lucas's face. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, then closed it again. Instead, he just nodded and drank his coffee. Over the next 3 weeks, 11 more calves were born. 9 survived. Evelyn was there for most of it, holding lanterns, fetching water, doing whatever Lucas and Tom needed. She learned to recognize the signs of labor, learned which cows needed help and which could manage alone. She learned that birth was messy and brutal and miraculous all at once. She also learned that she could do things she'd never thought possible. Could go 2 days on 3 hours of sleep. Could steady her hands while a calf was dying. Could keep working when every muscle screamed for rest. Ray said she was tougher than half the ranch hands he'd known. Tom said she'd do. From Tom, that was high praise. Lucas said less, but Evelyn caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something between surprise and respect, and maybe something else. April brought warmer weather and the slow transformation of the ranch from brown to green. The snow retreated to the highest peaks. Wildflowers appeared in patches of color that seemed impossible after months of white and gray. Evelyn stood on the porch one morning, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the mountains, and realized she'd stopped thinking about Boston entirely. This was home now. Margaret Henderson came by again in mid-April, this time with another woman in tow. "This is Sarah Chen," Margaret said. "Her husband runs the lumber operation north of here. Thought you two should meet." Sarah was younger than Margaret, maybe 30, with black hair pulled back in a practical braid and hands as rough as Evelyn's had become. She looked Evelyn over with frank assessment. "You made it through winter," Sarah said. "Most don't, first year." "I had good teachers," Evelyn replied. "Lucas is decent enough. Quiet, though." "You get lonely?" "Sometimes," Evelyn admitted. Sarah nodded. That's honest. Most women lie about it, say everything's perfect when they're going crazy from isolation. She glanced at Margaret. Tell her about the gathering. Every June, Margaret explained, those of us scattered around these parts get together. The women, I mean. Spend a few days just talking, sharing supplies, helping each other out. It's not fancy, but it helps. You should come, Sarah said, assuming Lucas can spare you. I'll ask, Evelyn said, though she suspected Lucas would say yes. He wasn't the type to keep her isolated. After the women left, Evelyn mentioned it to Lucas over dinner. He looked up from his plate, considering. June's busy, he said. But Tom and Ray can manage for a few days. You should go. You wouldn't mind? Why would I mind? You've earned it. Lucas paused. Besides, Margaret's right. The isolation gets to people. Better to have friends out here. Do you have friends? Evelyn asked. Lucas looked uncomfortable. Got Tom and Ray, got neighbors I can count on if there's trouble. That's enough. But it wasn't enough, Evelyn thought. Not for anyone. She'd seen the loneliness in him, buried deep but still there. The way he'd sit on the porch sometimes in the evenings, just staring at the mountains like they held answers he couldn't find. May came with hard work and longer days. They planted a vegetable garden behind the house. Lucas showed Evelyn how to work the soil, what to plant where, how to judge watering. Her back ached from bending over rows of seeds, but she liked it, liked the idea of growing food, of putting something into the ground and watching it come up. The cattle were moved to higher pastures. Fences needed mending after the winter damage. The barn roof needed repairs. There was always something that needed doing, and Evelyn did her share without complaint. One afternoon in late May, she was working in the garden when Ray came running from the direction of the creek, moving faster than she'd ever seen him move. Mrs. Hale, we need help! Evelyn dropped her hoe and ran. What happened? Lucas, fence post fell on him, his legs pinned. Tom's trying to lift it, but he can't do it alone. They ran together to the creek, where Lucas was lying in the mud with a massive post across his left leg. Tom was straining to lift it, his face red with effort. Lucas's face was gray. On 3, Evelyn said, grabbing the post. 1, 2, 3. They lifted together. The post came up just enough for Lucas to drag himself free. His leg was bent wrong. Evelyn's stomach lurched. Don't look at it, Lucas said through gritted teeth. We need to get it straight before it swells. Lucas, we should get you to town, to a doctor. Closest doctor's 2 days away and he's half drunk most of the time. Tom's set bones before. Haven't you, Tom? Tom nodded slowly. Few times. But it's going to hurt. Everything hurts already. Just do it. They got him back to the house, which took all 3 of them, and left Lucas white-faced and sweating. Evelyn boiled water, tore sheets into bandages, found the whiskey Lucas kept for emergencies. Tom felt along the leg carefully, then looked at Lucas. Clean break, I think. Could be worse. Do it, Lucas said. Evelyn held his hand while Tom worked. Lucas didn't scream, but his grip nearly broke her fingers. When it was done and the leg was splinted and wrapped, he passed out. Evelyn and Tom got him into bed and stood there, both of them shaking. He'll be all right, Tom said, like he was trying to convince himself. Seen worse. How long before he can walk? 6 weeks, maybe, if the bone set's right. Tom looked at her. You're going to have to run things for a while, Mrs. Hale. You and me and Ray. Can you do that? Evelyn thought about everything she'd learned in the past 7 months, everything Lucas and Tom and Ray had taught her. Yes, she said, I can do that. Lucas was a terrible patient. He hated being stuck in bed, hated not working, hated needing help with basic things. Evelyn brought him meals and books and tried to keep him from going crazy with boredom. I should be out there, he said on the 3rd day, staring at the ceiling. We've got fences that need... Tom and I finished the north fence yesterday. Ray's working on the irrigation channels. Everything's handled. You can't do everything yourself, and I'm not doing it myself. I've got help. Evelyn sat on the edge of his bed. Lucas, you have to let the bone heal. If you don't, you'll be crippled. Is that what you want? He glared at her. Then slowly, the fight went out of him. No. Then stay in bed and let us handle things. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn discovered she was more capable than she'd known. She and Tom managed the ranch between them, with Ray doing the heavy lifting. She learned to make decisions, to judge what needed doing first, to trust her own instincts. She learned that Lucas had been preparing her for this all along, probably without even realizing it. Every lesson, every correction, every patient explanation, it had all been building toward making her someone who could stand on her own. In the evenings, she'd sit with Lucas and tell him about the day's work. He'd ask questions, offer suggestions, but mostly he'd just listen. And sometimes, when she'd finished talking, he'd say, "You're doing good, better than I could have managed." "That's not true," Evelyn said. "It is. You see things I miss. You're patient with the animals. Ray and Tom respect you." Lucas shifted in bed, wincing. "I picked well when I picked you." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "I think we picked each other." He looked at her for a long moment. "Yeah, I think maybe we did." By early June, Lucas was up and moving around with a cane Tom had carved for him. The leg had healed mostly straight, though Lucas walked with a limp now that Evelyn suspected would never fully go away. He insisted on doing light work despite her protests, and she finally gave up arguing. He was as stubborn as the cattle. The gathering Margaret had mentioned was scheduled for mid-June. Evelyn rode out with Margaret and Sarah to a ranch owned by a woman named Kate Morrison, a widow who'd been running her place alone for 15 years. 7 other women were there, ranging in age from barely 20 to well past 60. They came from ranches scattered across 50 miles of territory, and for 3 days they cooked together, shared stories, mended each other's clothes, and talked about everything from cattle prices to childbirth to how to keep your sanity when the nearest neighbor was a half-day's ride away. Evelyn listened more than she talked at first, but by the second day she was sharing her own stories about Boston and the auction and the train west, about her first Montana winter and calving season and Lucas's broken leg. The women listened, asked questions, offered advice. No one judged. No one suggested she should have stayed in Boston or married better or chosen an easier life. "You're one of us now," Kate said on the last night, passing Evelyn a cup of something that definitely wasn't tea. "That means when you need help, you ask. And when someone else needs help, you go. That's how we survive out here." Evelyn rode back to the ranch feeling stronger than she had in months, not because the work was easier or the isolation less, but because she knew she wasn't alone. Lucas was on the porch when she arrived, leaning on his cane, watching the sunset. He turned as she dismounted. "How was it?" he asked. "Good, really good." Evelyn climbed the porch steps and stood beside him. "They're tough women. I like them." "You fit right in, I'd guess." "Maybe." She looked at him. "You're limping more. Is the leg bothering you?" "It's fine." "Lucas," he sighed. "It aches when the weather changes. Tom says that's normal. You should rest it more." "I've been resting it for 6 weeks. I'm done resting." But his voice wasn't angry, just tired. He looked at her and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I missed having you around. Place felt empty." It was the most vulnerable thing he'd said to her since that night he'd told her about his dreams. Evelyn felt her heart do something complicated. "I missed being here," she said quietly. They stood there in the fading light, not quite touching, and Evelyn realized something had changed between them. Something fundamental. They weren't just partners anymore. Weren't just 2 people sharing a house and a life out of necessity. They were something more. July brought heat that shimmered off the grasslands and turned the sky white. The cattle sought shade. The garden needed constant watering. Evelyn and Lucas fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side. Their movements coordinated from months of practice. One evening, they were sitting on the porch after dinner, too hot to do anything but breathe. Lucas had his bad leg propped up. Evelyn was fanning herself with a piece of paper, and the sunset was painting the mountains orange and purple. "You ever think about going back?" Lucas asked suddenly. "To Boston?" "Yeah." Evelyn considered it. "No, not anymore. There's nothing there for me." "What about here? Is there something here for you?" She looked at him. His face was carefully neutral, but there was something in his eyes, something hopeful and scared at the same time. "Yes," Evelyn said. "There is." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took her hand, just held it, his calloused palm against hers. It was the first time he'd touched her like that, deliberate and gentle, not just helping her down from a wagon or handing her a tool. "I'm glad you stayed," he said. "So am I." They sat there holding hands while the stars came out,
and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like coming home. August was brutal. The heat didn't let up. A drought set in, turning the grass brown and dropping the creek to a trickle. They had to move the cattle to higher ground where there was still water. Lucas pushed himself too hard, trying to make up for the weeks he'd lost to his broken leg. Evelyn watched him come in at night, exhausted and hurting, and wished she could make him slow down. "You're going to break something else," she said one night, helping him out of his boots. "I'm fine. You're limping worse than you did a month ago." "It's the heat. Makes everything swell up." Evelyn sat back on her heels and looked at him. "Lucas, you don't have to prove anything. Not to me. Not to Tom and Ray. Not to yourself." "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just—" He stopped, rubbed his face. "I lost half a season to this leg. We're behind. If we don't get caught up before winter, we will. We're doing fine. You don't know that. I do know it. Because you taught me. Because we're in this together." She took his hand. "You're not alone anymore, Lucas. You don't have to carry everything yourself." He looked at her like she'd said something profound instead of obvious. Then he pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and buried his face in her hair. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the August heat, and Evelyn felt the last of her walls come down. The drought broke in late August with a storm that rolled in from the west like something biblical. Thunder shook the house. Lightning turned the night bright as day. Rain came down in sheets so thick Evelyn couldn't see the barn from the porch. Lucas stood at the window, watching the storm with an expression she couldn't read. "Is this bad?" Evelyn asked. "Depends. If it's just rain, it's good. We need it. If it turns to hail—" He didn't finish, but she understood. Hail could destroy crops, injure cattle, damage buildings. The storm lasted all night. In the morning, the world was soaked and dripping and green again. No hail, just blessed rain. Lucas went out to check the damage and came back grinning, actually grinning, for the first time since Evelyn had known him. Creek's running full. Grass is going to come back. We might make it through after all." Evelyn threw her arms around him without thinking. Lucas caught her, startled, then hugged her back. And then he was kissing her, really kissing her, not the awkward peck he'd given her on their wedding day, but something real and desperate and full of everything they'd both been holding back. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucas looked almost scared. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize," Evelyn said. "Don't you dare apologize." "I didn't mean to. We agreed this was practical, not—" "Lucas." She put her hand on his face. "Things change. People change. I'm not the same woman who got off that train in October. Are you the same man who wrote that advertisement?" He was quiet for a moment. Then slowly, he shook his head. "No, I'm not." "So maybe we should stop pretending this is still just a practical arrangement." "What is it then?" Evelyn smiled. "I don't know, but I'd like to find out." Lucas kissed her again, slower this time, and Evelyn felt something break open inside her chest. Something that had been locked up tight since Boston, since her father's death, since she'd learned that the world was cruel and survival meant hardening yourself against it. But maybe, she thought, survival didn't have to mean being hard. Maybe it could mean letting someone in. September came with cooler nights and the knowledge that winter was coming again. But this time Evelyn wasn't afraid. She knew what to expect, knew she could handle it, and she wouldn't be facing it alone. Lucas started sleeping in her room. It happened gradually. First he'd fall asleep in her bed after they'd stayed up talking. Then he'd wake up and go back to his own room. Then one night, he just stayed. Neither of them talked about it. They didn't need to. Evelyn learned his body the way she'd learned the ranch. The scar on his ribs from the fence post. The way his bad leg ached in cold weather. The tension he carried in his shoulders from years of working alone. She learned to read his silences, to know when he needed to talk and when he needed quiet. And Lucas learned her. Learned the nightmares she still had sometimes about Boston, about her father, about losing everything. Learned that she liked her coffee sweet and her mornings quiet and the way the mountains looked at sunset. Learned that beneath her practical exterior was someone who'd been scared and alone for a long time. They built something together in those autumn weeks. Something neither of them had names for, but both of them recognized. It wasn't the romance Evelyn had read about in books. It was better. It was real. One evening in late September, they were lying in bed listening to the wind, and Lucas said, "I want to tell you about Mary." Evelyn went still. He'd never volunteered to talk about his first wife before. "You don't have to," she said. "I want to." Lucas stared at the ceiling. "We got married young. I was 22, she was 19. Her family had the ranch next to my father's place. It made sense, you know? Our families approved. She was pretty and practical, and everyone said we were a good match." "Were you happy?" "I thought so. But looking back, I don't know if I knew what happy was. We worked well together, got along. When she got pregnant, we were both excited, thought we were ready." His voice went rough. "But the baby came wrong. Like with Bessie, but worse. There wasn't anything anyone could do. The midwife tried. I tried. But Mary she bled, and then she was gone. The baby lived maybe an hour, long enough for me to hold him, long enough to give him a name, and then he was gone too." Evelyn took his hand. "I'm so sorry. I blame myself. Thought I should have gotten her to town, should have had a real doctor, should have done something different. Spent 6 years running this place alone, convincing myself I didn't deserve anything else. And then I put that advertisement in the paper, half expecting no one to answer, half hoping no one would, because then I could tell myself I tried and failed and go back to being alone." "But I answered," Evelyn said softly. "You answered, and you showed up, and you stayed even though this place must have looked like hell compared to what you left behind. And somewhere along the way I stopped thinking about what I deserved and started thinking about what I wanted." He turned to look at her. "I want you, Evelyn. Not as a practical partner or a housekeeper or someone to help with the ranch. I want you. Is that all right?" Evelyn felt tears on her face. "Yes, that's all right. Because I want you too." He kissed her then, gentle and sure, and Evelyn felt the last piece of something click into place. She'd come to Montana looking for survival. She'd found so much more. October arrived with the first hard frost and the anniversary of Evelyn's arrival. Lucas mentioned it one morning over coffee. "1 year," he said. "You made it a year." "We made it a year," Evelyn corrected. "Fair enough." He smiled at her, that rare, real smile that still made her chest feel warm. "Think you can make it another?" "I think I can make it 50 more." "That's a long time." "I've got nowhere else to be." Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. "Neither do I." They sat there in the morning light, drinking bad coffee and holding hands, and Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, desperate, afraid, willing to marry a stranger to survive. That woman felt like someone else entirely. She'd been forged by this place, by brutal winters and backbreaking work and isolation that could drive you crazy if you let it, by a quiet man who'd taught her to mend fences and birth calves and trust again, by the knowledge that survival wasn't just about staying alive, it was about finding something worth living for. The cattle were coming down from the high pastures, driven by instinct and the smell of coming snow. Evelyn stood on the porch watching them, and Lucas came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Evelyn said. "Nothing. How far I've come. How far we've come." "We've come pretty far," Lucas agreed. She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you. I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you." Lucas's face did something complicated, like he was surprised and moved and maybe a little scared all at once. "I love you too," he said, and it came out rough but certain. "Didn't think I'd ever say that again. Didn't think I'd ever feel it, but I do." They stood there holding each other while the wind picked up and the sky turned heavy with the promise of snow, and Evelyn knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The snow came early that year, blanketing the ranch in white by the first week of November. Evelyn woke one morning feeling strange, off in a way she couldn't name. Her stomach felt unsettled, her head light. She chalked it up to something she'd eaten and went about her morning routine. By midday, she was vomiting into the basin while Lucas held her hair back, looking worried. "Should I get Margaret?" he asked. "Or ride to town for the doctor?" "No, I'm fine. Just, my stomach's upset." "You sure?" Evelyn wasn't sure of anything, but she nodded anyway. Lucas made her lie down and brought her weak tea and dry bread. By evening, she felt better. The next morning, it happened again. It took her a week to realize what was happening. Another week to accept it.
And when she finally told Lucas sitting at the table over breakfast, his face went absolutely white. "You're certain?" he asked. "As certain as I can be without a doctor. But yes, I think so." Lucas stood up so fast his chair fell over. He walked to the window, stared out at the snow, his back rigid. "Lucas? I can't." His voice cracked. "I can't do this again." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He turned to face her, and she'd never seen him look so scared. "Mary died. The baby died. I watched them both die, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I can't watch that happen again. I can't lose you." She went to him, took his hands. They were shaking. "Lucas, that was 6 years ago. Medical knowledge has improved. And I'm strong. You know I am. I've survived everything this place has thrown at me. This is different. Women die in childbirth all the time out here. You know that. We've both seen it. And women survive too. Look at Margaret. She had 4 children. Sarah has 3. Kate Morrison had 6. Mary was strong too," Lucas said, and his voice was raw. It didn't matter. Evelyn felt anger flash through her fear. "So what are you saying? That you wish this wasn't happening? That you don't want this child?" "No, Lucas pulled away, ran his hands through his hair. "I don't know what I'm saying. I'm scared, Evelyn. I'm terrified." "So am I," she said quietly. "But we don't have a choice now. It's happening. And I need you to be here with me, not lost in 6-year-old grief." He looked at her, stricken. "I don't know if I can." The words hit her like a physical blow. Evelyn felt tears burn her eyes. "Then I guess I'll do this alone." She walked out, grabbed her cloak, and left the house. Outside, the world was frozen and still. She walked without direction, just needing to move, to breathe, to not be in that house with Lucas's fear filling up all the air. She ended up at the barn, where Tom was mending tack. He took one look at her face and set down his work. "You all right, Mrs. Hale?" "No," Evelyn said, and then she was crying, great ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Tom stood there looking uncomfortable, then awkwardly patted her shoulder. "There now, can't be that bad." "I'm pregnant," Evelyn choked out. "And he's so scared about what happened to his first wife that he can barely look at me." Tom was quiet for a long moment. "That's a hard thing. What happened to Mary and the baby? It broke something in him. Took him years to even start healing." "I know, but I need him now, and he's running scared," Tom finished. "Yeah, that sounds like Lucas." He sighed. "Give him time. He'll come around. He loves you too much not to." "What if he doesn't? What if I have this baby and lose him anyway?" "Then you'll manage, because that's what you do. You manage." Tom picked up his work again. "But I don't think it'll come to that. Lucas just needs to get his head right, and he will. He's stubborn, but he's not stupid." Evelyn went back to the house an hour later, calmer but still shaken. Lucas was sitting at the table, head in his hands. He looked up when she came in. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "What I said, that wasn't fair. You're right. You're here. This is happening, and I need to deal with it." "You need to do more than deal with it," Evelyn said. "This is our child, Lucas. Ours. And yes, I'm scared too. But I can't do this if you're going to spend the next 7 months waiting for me to die." Lucas flinched. "That's not, isn't it?" He was quiet. Then slowly he nodded. "Maybe it is, but I don't know how to stop. Every time I think about you in labor, I see Mary. I hear her screaming. I see all the blood. A shaky. "Stop." Evelyn crossed to him, knelt beside his chair. "I'm not Mary. This isn't 6 years ago, and you're not alone this time. We'll get Margaret here. Maybe Sarah too, women who know what they're doing. And if something goes wrong," her voice wavered, "if something goes wrong, at least we'll have tried. Together." Lucas looked at her with eyes full of pain and love and terror. "I can't lose you. You're everything." "Then don't lose me. Stay with me. Help me through this. That's all I'm asking." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. All right. I'll try." It wasn't a perfect resolution. Lucas was still scared. She could see it in the way he watched her, the way he flinched whenever she so much as stumbled. But he was trying,
And Evelyn knew that was the best she was going to get. The pregnancy was hard from the start. Evelyn was sick every morning for weeks, then sporadically after that. Her body changed in ways that felt alien and uncomfortable. Her back ached, her feet swelled, she couldn't sleep well because no position felt right. But she also felt the baby move, felt those first flutters in December, then stronger kicks as winter wore on. And every time she felt movement, she'd take Lucas's hand and press it to her belly so he could feel it too. The first time the baby kicked under his palm, Lucas's eyes went wide. That's our child," Evelyn said. "Strong, fighting, just like us." Something in Lucas's face softened. Not all the way. The fear was still there, but enough. He started talking to her belly sometimes, late at night when he thought she was asleep, telling the baby about the ranch, about the mountains, about all the things they'd do together. Evelyn would lie there listening, her heart full, and hope that everything would be all right. Margaret came by in January and confirmed what Evelyn already knew. Baby's due in June, looks like. Maybe early July. "That's a long time from now," Evelyn said. "It'll go faster than you think, and slower. Pregnancy's like that." Margaret looked at her shrewdly. "Lucas holding up?" "Barely. He's terrified." "Of course he is. He watched his whole world die last time. Can't blame him for being scared." Margaret squeezed Evelyn's hand. "But you're stronger than Mary was. Not that she was weak. She just had bad luck. Sometimes that's all it is. Luck." "That's not reassuring." "Wasn't meant to be. I'm not going to lie to you. Childbirth is dangerous, always has been. But you've got a better chance than most. You're young, you're healthy, you've been doing hard physical work that's made you strong, and you've got me and Sarah and Kate if you need us. We'll make sure you come through this." Evelyn wanted to believe her. Some days she did. Other days, usually when Lucas looked at her with barely concealed panic, she wasn't so sure. February was brutal. Another blizzard trapped them inside for days. Evelyn was starting to show now, her belly rounding out in a way that made simple tasks awkward. Lucas became almost obsessively protective. He didn't want her lifting anything heavy, didn't want her going out in the cold, didn't want her doing half the things she'd been doing all year. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Evelyn snapped one afternoon when he tried to take a bucket of water from her hands. "I know, "Lucas, you have to stop. You're driving me crazy. And yourself. I'm fine. The baby's fine. We're going to be fine." "You don't know that." "Neither do you. But we can't live the next 4 months like this." He looked miserable. "I'm trying not to be. I know I'm being overprotective, anxious, terrified." Evelyn set down the bucket and took his face in her hands. "I know. And I understand. But you have to trust me. Trust that I know my own body, that I'll tell you if something's wrong. Can you do that?" Lucas closed his eyes. "I can try." And he did try. Evelyn could see the effort it took, the way he'd reach for her and then stop himself, the way he'd bite back warnings and suggestions. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. March came with the slow thaw and Evelyn's belly growing larger. She could barely button her dresses anymore. Margaret brought her some of her old maternity clothes, worn soft from use, and Evelyn wore them gratefully. The baby was active now, kicking and rolling at all hours. Sometimes Evelyn would sit on the porch in the weak spring sun, hands on her belly, talking to the life inside her, telling it stories about Boston and the train west and the ranch and Lucas, building a bridge between the person she'd been and the person she was becoming. Lucas's mother, she thought sometimes. Lucas's wife. Neither role felt entirely real yet, but both felt right. One evening in late March, Sarah Chen showed up with her oldest daughter, a girl of about 8, who stared at Evelyn's belly with unabashed curiosity. "Mama says you're having a baby," the girl said. "I am," Evelyn confirmed. "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes, but mostly it's just strange," Sarah laughed. "Strange is one way to put it." She sent her daughter outside to play and sat down with Evelyn. "I wanted to talk to you about what's coming, the birth itself." Evelyn felt her stomach clench. "All right. Margaret will be there. I will too if I can make it. My youngest is only 2, so it depends on timing. Kate might come if you want her. Between the 3 of us, we've delivered probably 30 babies. We know what we're doing." That's good. But you need to know it's going to be hard. maybe the hardest thing you've ever done. It's going to hurt in ways you can't imagine. You're going to want to give up, and you can't. You have to keep going, keep pushing, keep fighting. Evelyn swallowed. How long does it usually take? Depends. First babies are slow. Could be hours, could be a full day. There's no way to know. And if something goes wrong, Sarah met her eyes steadily, then we'll do everything we can. But Evelyn, you have to go into this believing you'll come through. Fear can make labor harder. Your body tenses up, doesn't work the way it should. You have to stay calm. Trust your body. Trust us. I'm trying. I know, and you'll do fine. You're tougher than you think. Sarah paused. How's Lucas? Barely holding it together. Yeah, I figured. Men are useless for this part. Best thing you can do is keep him busy when the time comes. Let Margaret and me handle the birth. He can pace outside like they all do. Despite her fear, Evelyn smiled. He'll hate that. Too bad. This is women's work. He'll just have to wait. April brought warmer weather and Evelyn's increasing discomfort. Her back hurt constantly. Her feet were so swollen she could barely fit them into boots. She was tired all the time but couldn't sleep. The baby seemed to have decided her ribs were a punching bag. Lucas did his best to help. He rubbed her back at night, propped pillows around her, brought her food when she was too tired to cook. He was still scared. She could see it in his eyes, but he was present. That was what mattered. One night in late April, Evelyn woke to wetness and a cramping sensation in her belly. For a confused moment, she thought her water had broken, that the baby was coming early. Then she realized it was just her body preparing, practicing for what was to come. False labor, Margaret had called it. Lucas woke when she got up. What's wrong? Nothing, just my body's being dramatic. Should I get Margaret? No, it's too early. This is normal. She hoped it was normal. Margaret had said it was normal. Lucas got up anyway, built up the fire, made tea. They sat together in the pre-dawn darkness, waiting for the cramping to pass. It did, eventually, and Evelyn went back to bed. But she didn't sleep. Just lay there thinking about what was coming, trying to steel herself for it. May brought the realization that she was running out of time. The baby would come soon. Maybe in a few weeks, maybe sooner. Her body felt huge and unwieldy. She moved slowly, carefully, conscious of the life she carried. Margaret came by every few days now, checking on her, making sure everything was progressing normally. Baby's in the right position, she said during one visit. Head down. That's good. How much longer? Evelyn asked. Hard to say. Could be 2 weeks. Could be 4. Babies come when they're ready. Lucas was a wreck. He jumped at every sound, watched Evelyn like she might disappear, barely slept. Evelyn knew he was reliving Mary's death in his head, preparing himself for the worst. She tried to reassure him, but words felt hollow against that kind of fear. The first real contraction hit on a Tuesday morning in early June. Evelyn was in the garden, pulling weeds, when pain seized her middle and stole her breath. She stood there, bent over, waiting for it to pass. Lucas saw her from across the yard and came running. Is it? I don't know. Maybe. The pain eased. Evelyn straightened carefully. It could be false labor again. But it wasn't. The contractions came and went all day, irregular but undeniable. By evening, Evelyn knew this was it. Lucas rode to get Margaret while Tom stayed with Evelyn. She paced the house, hands on her belly, breathing through each contraction. They weren't close together yet, hours to go probably, but fear was starting to creep in around the edges. Margaret arrived at dusk, took one look at Evelyn, and said, "Let's get you settled. This is going to be a long night." She was right. The labor went on for hours. Contractions came and went, building in intensity. Evelyn walked, squatted, leaned against furniture, tried every position Margaret suggested. Nothing made it better. The pain just kept coming, wave after wave. Lucas was outside on the porch. Evelyn could hear him pacing. Part of her wanted him there, wanted his hand to hold, but another part was glad he couldn't see her like this, sweating, crying, making sounds she'd never made before. "You're doing good," Margaret said, wiping Evelyn's face with a cool cloth. "Just keep breathing. Don't fight the pain. Let it work." But Evelyn was fighting. Every instinct told her to tense up, to brace against what was happening. Margaret kept telling her to relax, to open up, But how could she relax when her body felt like it was being torn apart? Midnight came and went. The contractions were closer now, harder. Evelyn was exhausted, and she wasn't even at the worst part yet. Sarah arrived sometime after midnight, her daughter left with Kate Morrison. She took one look at Evelyn and nodded grimly. "How far along?" she asked Margaret. "Maybe halfway. It's slow. First babies usually are." Sarah came to Evelyn's side. "You're doing fine. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you are." Evelyn wanted to scream at her that she wasn't fine, that this was hell, that she couldn't do this. But another contraction hit and she couldn't speak at all, could only grip Sarah's hand and try to breathe. Dawn came gray and cold. Evelyn had been in labor for over 12 hours. She was shaking with exhaustion, drenched in sweat, and the baby still hadn't come. Margaret checked her and shook her head. "Not quite ready. Another hour? Maybe 2. "I can't," Evelyn gasped. "I can't do this for another 2 hours." "Yes, you can. You don't have a choice." Outside, Evelyn could hear Lucas. He'd been out there all night, pacing, waiting. She wondered if he was reliving Mary's death, wondered if he was preparing himself to lose her. Well, she thought through a haze of pain, he's going to be disappointed. "Because I'm not dying. Not today." The anger gave her strength. She bore down through the next contraction and the next, focusing all her fear and rage and desperation into the simple act of bringing this baby into the world. "That's it," Margaret said. "That's it, Evelyn. Push." She pushed, again and again, until she thought she'd split apart, until the pain was everything, consuming her entirely, until she couldn't remember what it felt like to not hurt. And then Margaret was saying, "The head's out. One more and you're done." Evelyn gathered every scrap of strength she had left and pushed with everything in her. She felt the baby slide free in a rush of relief so intense it was almost painful. And then there was crying. Not her crying, but a baby crying, strong and angry and alive. "It's a girl," Sarah said, laughing. "You have a daughter." Margaret was cleaning the baby, checking her over. Evelyn lay there shaking, too exhausted to move, waiting to hear that something was wrong. But Margaret just smiled and placed the baby on Evelyn's chest. "She's perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, healthy lungs. You did it." Evelyn looked down at the tiny red face, the dark hair plastered to the small skull, the eyes squinted shut against the light. Her daughter. Hers and Lucas's. Alive. She started crying then, great racking sobs of relief and joy and exhaustion. "Someone should tell Lucas," Sarah said quietly. Margaret went to the door and called out, "Lucas, you can come in now." He burst through the door like something wild, eyes scanning the room for disaster. When he saw Evelyn alive, sitting up, holding a baby, he stopped dead. You're all right?" "I'm all right," Evelyn said. "We both are. Come meet your daughter." Lucas crossed the room slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement might shatter the moment. He knelt beside the bed and stared at the baby with an expression Evelyn had never seen before. Wonder and fear and love all mixed together. "She's so small," he whispered. "She's perfect," Evelyn said. "And she's ours." Lucas reached out a tentative finger. The baby's tiny hand wrapped around it instinctively. Something broke in Lucas's face then. He made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pressed his forehead to Evelyn's shoulder. "Thank you," he choked out. "Thank you for being alive. Thank you for her. Thank you for—" "Lucas." Evelyn ran her hand through his hair. "We did this together." He lifted his head and his face was wet with tears. "I love you. I love you both so much." "I know," Evelyn said. "I love you too." Margaret and Sarah cleaned up quietly, giving them space. When they were done, Margaret said, "You should rest, both of you. We'll stay nearby in case you need anything." But before she left, she pulled Lucas aside. Evelyn heard her say quietly, "She was strong, stronger than Mary, and luckier. Sometimes that's all it takes." Lucas nodded, unable to speak. When they were alone, Lucas climbed carefully onto the bed beside Evelyn. They lay there together, the baby between them, watching her sleep. Evelyn had never been so tired in her life, but she'd also never felt so complete. "What should we name her?" Lucas asked. Evelyn had been thinking about this for months. "Emma. I always liked Emma." "Emma Hale." Lucas tried it out. "It's good. It's strong. Like her mother, Evelyn said. Like both her parents, Lucas corrected. They stayed like that for hours, dozing and waking, marveling at the small life they'd created. And when Emma woke and cried for the first time, hungry and demanding, Evelyn fed her while Lucas watched with an expression that looked like healing. The first weeks with Emma were nothing like Evelyn had imagined. Books and well-meaning advice had painted motherhood as natural, instinctive, something that would simply unfold once the baby arrived. The reality was messier and harder and more exhausting than anything she'd experienced on the ranch. Emma cried. She cried when she was hungry, when she was tired, when her stomach hurt, and sometimes for no reason Evelyn could figure out. She cried at 2 in the morning and 4 in the morning, and just when Evelyn had finally fallen back asleep. Lucas would wake too, hovering uselessly, asking what he could do. "Nothing," Evelyn said one night, rocking Emma while tears of frustration ran down her own face. "There's nothing you can do. She won't stop." Lucas took the baby gently from her arms. "Go sleep. I'll walk with her." "You have to work in the morning. So do you. And you just pushed a human being out of your body 2 weeks ago. Go sleep." Evelyn was too tired to argue. She collapsed into bed and was unconscious in seconds. When she woke 3 hours later, Lucas was still walking the floor with Emma, singing something off-key and barely coherent. The baby had finally settled, sleeping against his chest. He looked at Evelyn with exhausted eyes. "I think she just needed to be held. We've been holding her constantly." "I know, but I think that's what babies do. They just need to know you're there." Something in Evelyn's chest loosened. Lucas was terrified of this tiny creature. She could see it in the careful way he held her, in the panic that crossed his face whenever Emma cried. But he was trying. That was what mattered. By the time Emma was a month old, they'd fallen into a rhythm that was less chaos and more controlled disaster. Evelyn learned to feed her while still half asleep, learned to tell the difference between hungry cries and tired cries, learned to function on 3 hours of sleep scattered across a night. Lucas took Emma in the morning so Evelyn could rest, walking the floor with her while he drank coffee and talked about the ranch work ahead. Tom and Ray were useless with babies, but excellent with everything else. They picked up the slack without complaint, handling tasks Evelyn and Lucas couldn't manage while juggling an infant. Margaret stopped by every few days to check on them, bringing food and reassurance, and the reminder that this phase wouldn't last forever. "She'll sleep through the night eventually," Margaret said one afternoon, holding Emma while Evelyn tried to eat something. "Usually around 3 months, sometimes 4, sometimes never, but we don't talk about those cases." "That's not helpful," Evelyn said. Margaret grinned. "Parenthood isn't helpful. It's just hard, and then suddenly it's different. Hard, and then one day you look up and they're grown and you wonder where the time went." By July, Emma was smiling. Real smiles, not just gas, that lit up her whole face. The first time she smiled at Lucas, he went completely still, staring at her like she'd performed a miracle. "Did you see that?" he asked Evelyn. "I saw." She smiled at me. "She likes you." Lucas looked down at his daughter with an expression of such pure wonder that Evelyn felt her throat tighten. This was what she'd hoped for. Not that Lucas would stop being afraid, fear was part of loving something this fragile, but that he'd find joy too. That Emma would heal something in him that had been broken for 6 years. August brought a letter that changed everything. It arrived with a supply wagon from town, addressed to Lucas in handwriting he didn't recognize. He opened it at the kitchen table while Evelyn fed Emma, and his face went carefully blank. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. "My uncle died. My father's brother, down in Colorado, left me his ranch." Lucas set the letter down. 5,000 acres, good grazing land, according to the lawyer, worth a fair amount. That's a lot." "Yeah." Lucas stared at the letter. "He wants me to come down, sign papers, decide what to do with it. Sell it or keep it or, I don't know." "Are you going to go?" "I don't want to leave you and Emma. Not for the 2 weeks it'd take to get down there and back." Evelyn shifted Emma to her other arm. "We'd manage, and it sounds important." Lucas looked torn. Finally, he shook his head. "I'll write to the lawyer, see if he can handle it by mail. I'm not leaving you two." But Evelyn could see the opportunity there, even if Lucas couldn't. That night, after Emma was asleep, she brought it up again. "What if we didn't sell it?" she said. "What if we used the money to expand here? Or What if we did something different with it? Like what?
Evelyn had been thinking about this for months, ever since the gathering in June, about all those women scattered across impossible distances, trying to survive in a landscape that was beautiful and brutal in equal measure. About the ones who didn't make it, who went back east or gave up or just disappeared into the hard work and isolation. What if we used it to help other women? She said slowly. Women like me. Women who need a fresh start, who need somewhere to go. We could offer them work here on the ranch, pay them fair wages, give them a place to live while they figure out what comes next. Lucas looked at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. You want to turn the ranch into some kind of, what, charity? Not charity, a business. We'd need the help anyway as we expand, and these women would work hard, I know they would. They'd be grateful for the chance. Evelyn, we barely have enough for ourselves. We have enough. And with your uncle's ranch, we could have more than enough. We could make a real difference, Lucas. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You're serious about this? I am. I keep thinking about what would have happened to me if you hadn't put that advertisement in the paper. Where would I be now? Dead in some Boston alley, probably. Or worse. Someone gave me a chance when I had nothing. I want to give that to other women. Lucas looked at her with something like awe. You're extraordinary. You know that? I'm practical. Like you. No. You're better than practical. He stopped, shook his head. All right, let's look at the numbers, see if it's even possible. They spent the next week going over finances, talking to Tom and Ray about the work that would be needed, writing letters to the lawyer in Colorado. The more they dug into it, the more feasible it seemed. They could sell the Colorado ranch, use the money to expand their operation here, and hire women who needed work. It wouldn't be charity. It would be a partnership. By September, they had a plan. Lucas sold his uncle's ranch for a good price and used the money to buy more cattle, expand the barn, and build a second bunkhouse. In October, they posted notices in towns across Montana and Wyoming. Women wanted for ranch work, fair wages, room and board, experience not required. Inquire at Hale Ranch, Stillwater. The first woman arrived in November. Her name was Ruth, and she was maybe 19, with haunted eyes and a carpet bag that held everything she owned. She'd been working in a saloon in Billings and wanted out. I can work, she said, standing on the porch like she expected to be turned away. I'm not afraid of hard work. I need somewhere that's not... You don't have to explain, Evelyn said. Come in, you're safe here. Ruth stayed. She learned to care for cattle and mend fences and cook over a wood stove. She was quiet and skittish at first, flinching at sudden movements, but slowly she relaxed. By December, she was smiling. By January, she was laughing at Ray's terrible jokes. The second woman arrived in February. Her name was Alice, and she was older, maybe 40, with work-roughened hands and a face that had seen too much. She'd been widowed, lost her farm to debts, and had nowhere left to go. I don't know what I can offer, Alice said. I'm not young anymore. You're here, Evelyn said. That's enough. Alice turned out to be brilliant with numbers. She took over the ranch accounts, organized their supplies, and somehow made their money stretch further than Lucas had managed in years. She and Ruth shared the new bunkhouse, and sometimes Evelyn would hear them talking late at night, sharing stories, building the kind of friendship that came from surviving hard things. By spring, there were 4 women on the ranch, Ruth and Alice, plus Caroline, who'd fled an abusive marriage, and Mary, not Lucas's Mary, but a different Mary, who'd been working as a maid in a hotel and wanted something better. They all worked hard, all brought something valuable, and all transformed the ranch into something bigger than Evelyn and Lucas could have managed alone. Emma was a year old by then, walking and babbling and getting into everything. She adored the women, toddling between them while they worked, demanding attention. Ruth was her favorite. She'd carry Emma around on her hip while checking fence lines, talking to her like she understood every word. You're good with her, Evelyn said one afternoon, watching them together. Ruth looked uncomfortable. I had a baby sister before everything went wrong. I used to take care of her. What happened to her? She died. Fever. Ruth's voice was flat. I couldn't save her. Evelyn put a hand on her arm. I'm sorry. It's all right. It was a long time ago. But Ruth held Emma a little tighter, and Evelyn understood. Everyone here was healing from something. The ranch had become a place where broken people came to put themselves back together. The second year with Emma was easier than the first. She slept through the night, ate real food, started talking in short sentences that usually involved demanding something or declaring ownership of random objects. She was stubborn and fearless and entirely herself. Lucas was completely in love with her. He'd take her out on Stella, holding her in front of him in the saddle, showing her the ranch that would one day be hers. He'd tell her stories about his childhood, about Mary, the first Mary, his wife, about the day Evelyn arrived on the train looking terrified and determined. "Tell me again about Mama on the train," Emma would demand, and Lucas would tell the story one more time, adding silly details to make her laugh. Evelyn watched them together and felt something settle in her chest. This was what she'd wanted, not just survival, but a life, a family, a purpose. By the time Emma was 3, the ranch employed 8 women. They'd built a third bunkhouse and expanded the cattle operation significantly. Lucas and Tom managed the heavy work and long-range planning, but the women handled day-to-day operations with a competence that surprised the neighboring ranchers. Margaret stopped by one afternoon and looked around at all the activity. Women mending fences, moving cattle, working in the expanded garden, and shook her head. "You've built something remarkable here," she said. "People are talking about it, you know. Not all of it good." "Let them talk," Evelyn said. "We're not hurting anyone." "Some of the men think you're taking jobs from people who need them. Some think you're running a charity. Some think worse." "What do you think?" Margaret smiled. "I think you're doing what women have always done, making something out of nothing, taking care of each other, building something that lasts." She paused. "Your father would be proud if he could see what you've made of yourself." Evelyn thought about her father sometimes, about the weak man who'd drowned in debt and despair, who'd left her nothing but bills and shame. She'd been so angry at him for so long, but somewhere along the way she'd stopped being angry. He'd done his best with what he had. It wasn't enough, but it was something. "I don't know if he'd be proud," Evelyn said, "but I am. I'm proud of what we've built." The years unfolded like pages in a book. Emma grew from a toddler to a little girl who could ride her own pony and help with simple chores. Lucas's limp improved with time and use, until most days he barely favored the leg at all. The ranch prospered. The women came and went. Some stayed for years, some just long enough to save money and move on to something else. All of them left different than they'd arrived. Ruth met a ranch hand from a neighboring spread and married him when Emma was 5. She cried when she told Evelyn she was leaving. "You don't have to leave," Evelyn said. "You could both stay here." "I know, but I need to build my own life now. You gave me that, the chance to heal enough to want something for myself." Ruth hugged her tight. "Thank you for everything." Alice stayed. She had nowhere else to go and no desire to leave. She became the ranch manager in all but name, running operations with calm efficiency, while Lucas and Evelyn focused on the bigger picture. When Emma was 7, Alice started teaching her numbers and letters in the evenings, patient and thorough. "She's bright," Alice told Evelyn. "Scary bright. She's going to need real schooling eventually." "I know," Evelyn said. "We've been talking about it." The nearest school was in Stillwater, which meant Emma would need to board in town during the week. The thought of it made Evelyn's chest ache, but she knew it was necessary. Emma deserved opportunities Evelyn had never had. The chance to learn, to grow, to become whoever she wanted to be. When Emma turned 8, they enrolled her in the Stillwater school. She cried the first week, homesick and overwhelmed. But by the second week she was making friends, and by the third she was complaining that weekends at the ranch were boring compared to town. "She's not going to want to stay here," Lucas said one night, watching Emma play with a friend who'd come to visit. "When she grows up, she's going to want more than this." "Maybe," Evelyn said. "Or maybe she'll come back. Either way, it's her choice." Lucas looked at her. "You're not worried about it." "I'm terrified, but I learned a long time ago that you can't protect people from their own lives. You can only give them the tools to handle whatever comes." By the time Emma was 10, the ranch employed 15 women and had expanded to include a small dairy operation and a vegetable farm that supplied half the restaurants in Stillwater. What had started as Evelyn's desperate idea had become a thriving business that was changing lives. They called it the Hale Women's Ranch, though Lucas insisted his name shouldn't be on it. "This is your thing," he said. You built it. We built it together. Evelyn corrected. Like everything else. Women came from all over, widows and runaways and girls who'd gotten pregnant and been thrown out by their families. Some stayed, some moved on, but all of them left with skills and savings and the knowledge that they could survive anything. Evelyn hired a woman who'd been a teacher back east to run a small school for the workers' children. She brought in a retired nurse to handle injuries and illness. She created something that looked a little like a community and a little like a family and a lot like hope. Lucas watched all of this with quiet pride. He'd aged well, his face lined but strong, his body still capable despite the limp. He was patient with the women who were afraid of men, stern with the ones who tried to slack off, and fair to everyone. He'd become exactly what Evelyn had needed when she'd stepped off that train. A partner. An equal. One evening, when Emma was 12, home from school for the summer, they were all sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Emma was reading, Lucas was mending harness, Evelyn was just breathing. The ranch spread out before them, alive with activity even at this hour. "Mama," Emma said, looking up from her book, "why did you come here? Really?" Evelyn had told her the basics, that she'd needed somewhere to go after her father died, that Lucas had needed help on the ranch, that they'd made an arrangement, but she'd never told her the whole truth, the desperation, the fear, the sense that she was stepping off the edge of the world into nothing. "I was out of options," Evelyn said honestly. "I had no money, no family, no way to survive in Boston. Your father offered me a chance when no one else would." "Were you scared?" "Terrified." Emma thought about that. "But you did it anyway." "I did it anyway. Because sometimes the scary choice is the only choice you have, and sometimes the scary choice turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you." Lucas looked up from his work. Their eyes met, and Evelyn saw everything they'd built together reflected there. The hard years and the good ones. The losses and the victories. The way they'd taken two broken people and made something whole. "Are you glad you came?" Emma asked. "Every single day," Evelyn said. Emma went back to her book, satisfied. Lucas went back to his mending. And Evelyn sat there thinking about the woman she'd been 15 years ago. That frightened girl in a borrowed dress, stepping onto a train with nothing but desperation and one battered trunk. She barely recognized that girl now. The woman she'd become was tougher, stronger, more certain. She'd learned to birth calves and mend fences and run a business. She'd learned to love a difficult man and raise a stubborn daughter and build a community from nothing. She'd learned that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about finding something worth living for. The ranch that had started as Lucas's lonely outpost had become something bigger. A refuge. A training ground. A place where women learned they were capable of more than they'd ever imagined. Evelyn had created exactly what she'd needed 15 years ago. A second chance. Over the years, she'd watched dozens of women transform. Watched them arrive broken and leave whole. Watched them find strength they didn't know they had. Some married and started families. Some struck out on their own to start businesses or buy land. Some stayed at the ranch, building lives that were simple and hard and entirely their own. Ruth came back to visit sometimes with her husband and 3 children. She'd started her own small ranch and was doing well. "I never would have had the courage to try if I hadn't worked for you first," she told Evelyn. "You showed me it was possible." Alice was still there, now in her 60s, training younger women to manage accounts and handle supplies. She'd become indispensable, the ranch's backbone. She'd found purpose here and family after losing everything else. Margaret Henderson was in her 70s now, but still riding over to check on things. "You've outlasted most of us," she told Evelyn one afternoon. "Most women who come out here either die or leave within 5 years. You stayed. You thrived. You built something that's going to outlive all of us." "I had help," Evelyn said. "We all had help. The difference is what you did with it." Lucas's hair was mostly gray now, his face deeply lined from years of sun and wind. But his hands were still strong, his mind still sharp. And when he looked at Evelyn, she still saw the man who'd met her at the train station. Guarded and careful, and willing to take a chance on someone who needed one. They'd had 2 more children after Emma, a son named Jack and another daughter named Sarah. Both were grown now, Jack working the ranch with Lucas and Ray's son, Sarah teaching school in Helena. The house that had seemed so empty when Evelyn first arrived was full now,
loud with life and laughter and the organized chaos of a working ranch. One evening when Evelyn was in her 50s, she and Lucas were sitting on the porch, like they'd done 1,000 times before. Their bodies were older, slower, marked by decades of hard work, but they were still here, still together. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked, answering that advertisement. Evelyn thought about everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained, about the life she'd left behind and the life she'd built. "No," she said, "not once." "You?" "Not once," Lucas said. He took her hand, his fingers threading through hers the way they had for 25 years. "Best decision I ever made. Putting that ad in the paper. Best decision I ever made was getting on that train." They sat there in the fading light, watching the mountains turn purple in the distance, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Women's voices drifted from the bunkhouses. Cattle lowed in the pastures. Somewhere a dog barked. This was home. Not the house she'd grown up in, not the life she'd been born to, but the one she'd chosen. The one she'd built with her own hands and her own will and the partnership of a man who'd needed saving as much as she had. Evelyn had learned something fundamental in those years, that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it. That strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about putting yourself back together. That love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing someone every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. She'd come to Montana with nothing and built everything. Not alone, never alone, but with the help of people who believed in second chances and hard work and the stubborn refusal to give up. She'd created a place where women like her, desperate, scared, determined, could find their footing and discover they were capable of more than they'd ever imagined. The ranch had changed the territory around it. Other ranches started hiring women, inspired by Hale's success. Towns started seeing single women differently, as potential workers and business owners instead of charity cases or dangers to be managed. It was a small shift, but it mattered. Every woman who came through the ranch left ripples that spread outward, changing minds and opening possibilities. When Evelyn was 60, Emma came home with her own daughter, Evelyn's first grandchild, and asked if she could stay at the ranch for a while. Her marriage had fallen apart, and she needed time to figure out what came next. "Of course," Evelyn said, taking the baby from Emma's arms. "This is what this place is for." Emma looked around the ranch, at the women working, at the buildings and fences and life that thrived here. "You built something amazing, Mama. I didn't understand it when I was young, but I do now." "We all build what we need," Evelyn said. "I needed a place to belong. Your father needed someone to believe in again. The women who come here need a chance. We just give each other what we can." Emma stayed for 6 months, healing and planning and learning to trust herself again. When she left, she took over a small school in Butte and eventually became a principal, shaping young minds the way her mother had shaped lives. She wrote letters often, telling Evelyn about the girls she was helping, the ones who needed extra support or second chances. "I'm doing what you did," Emma wrote, "just in a different way." Evelyn understood. The work of building something better, of lifting others up, of refusing to let people fall through the cracks. That work took many forms. It didn't matter if you did it on a ranch or in a classroom or in 1,000 other ways. What mattered was doing it. Lucas died in his sleep when he was 72, his heart simply giving out one winter night. Evelyn woke to find him cold beside her, his face peaceful. She sat there for a long time, holding his hand, remembering everything. The advertisement, the awkward wedding, the slow building of trust and then love, the life they'd made together. She buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read Lucas Hale. He gave chances. Tom and Ray were there, both old men now but still working the ranch. Alice was there. Dozens of women who'd worked for them over the years came to pay respects, some traveling hundreds of miles. "He changed my life," one woman said. "Gave me a job when no one else would." "He treated us like we mattered," another said, "like we were capable." Evelyn stood at his grave after everyone left and said the things she'd never quite managed to say while he was alive. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building this with me. Thank you for loving me, even when it was hard." She ran the ranch for another 10 years after Lucas died, until her own body started failing. Then Emma came home permanently, bringing her daughter, and together they kept the Hale Women's Ranch going. The mission didn't change. The work didn't stop. Women still came, still learned, still transformed. On her last day, Evelyn sat on the porch in the chair she'd occupied for 40 years, wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching the sun set over the mountains one final time. Emma sat beside her, holding her hand. "Did I do all right?" Evelyn asked. "With all of this?" "Mama, you did more than all right. You changed lives. You changed the whole territory. You proved that women could run businesses and support each other and build something that lasts. Your father did just as much."
"I know you did it together, but it started with you, with your idea, with your courage." Emma squeezed her hand. "I'm so proud to be your daughter." Evelyn closed her eyes. She was tired, so tired, but she was also satisfied. She'd lived a full life, a hard life, a good life. She'd taken the terrifying leap off that train platform in Stillwater and landed somewhere she could never have imagined. She'd loved and lost and built and survived. She'd made a difference. That night she died peacefully in her sleep, just like Lucas. They buried her beside him on the hill, with a stone that read, "Evelyn Hale." She gave hope. The ranch continued for another 50 years under Emma's management and then her daughter's. The original buildings were preserved, turned into a museum that told the story of what two desperate people had built together. The story of how a marriage of convenience became a love story, and how that love story became a movement. People came from all over to see it, to walk the land where Evelyn had learned to mend fences and birth calves and believe in herself. To stand in the house where she and Lucas had slowly transformed from strangers into partners into something more. To understand that second chances were possible, that reinvention was real, that courage looked like getting on a train to nowhere and building a life from scratch. The lesson Evelyn left behind wasn't complicated. It was this: that sometimes the worst moments of your life lead to the best ones. That sometimes losing everything gives you the freedom to build something better. That sometimes the scariest choice is the right one. That survival isn't enough. You have to find something worth surviving for. That you're stronger than you think, braver than you know, capable of more than you can imagine. That asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That second chances are precious, and when you get one, you should use it to give someone else theirs. That love isn't about fairy tales or perfection, it's about choosing someone every day, about building something together through hard work and patience and the stubborn refusal to give up. That home isn't where you're born, it's where you choose to plant roots and do the work and create something that matters. Evelyn Mercer had boarded a train in Boston with nothing but fear and determination. She'd gotten off in Montana and spent the next 45 years proving that was enough. That she was enough. That anyone willing to try, willing to work, willing to believe in themselves, even when no one else did, they were enough too. The ranch stood as proof. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and lasting and built on the foundation of two broken people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment and made something beautiful out of their broken pieces. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across those Montana hills, you could almost hear them. Lucas and Evelyn, still there, still together, still building something that would outlast them both.